Right, welcome everyone to the University of Alabama webinar, part of our Grad Connect series, Preparing the Perfect Application. So this webinar series is really designed to help guide prospective students and applicants through what is needed to be successful in the application process. Of course, we do hope that you apply to the University of Alabama, but a lot of the information that you get here is going to be useful for any place that you may be applying to. We want you to be successful wherever you end up going to graduate school. So that's the most important thing to us. Now, I'll start out with a little bit of information about myself. So my name is Andrew Goodliff. I'm Associate Dean for Admissions, Recruitment, and Fellowships in the University of Alabama. So I've been in this role since about 2012. So about 14 years now of experience in this position of heading up the admissions side. So it's given me a lot of insight into what it takes to be successful in the application process and which students are successful. Now, I'm also a faculty member at the University of Alabama. I'm an associate professor of geophysics. The reason there's a ship there is by training, I'm a marine geophysicist. So my specialization is subsea floor imaging, seafloor mapping, a lot of it applied to the oil industry. So I also bring the experience of being a faculty member who has advised many students and graduated many students as well. So having that dual perspective of the admissions side and the mentoring students through the program gives me a lot of insight. Now, I do want to tell you a little bit about the University of Alabama. So we are the flagship public research university for the state of Alabama. So in the US, there's 50 states, so there's 50 flagship universities. Those are the big public universities that really represent the state. We've been around a while, so we were founded in 1831. We are, like most flagship universities, an R1 research university. So that puts us in the top tier of research universities in the US. And if you are looking at the research path, so if you're looking at a PhD or a research master's, looking closely at R1 universities is the way to start. Those are the universities that are going to have more funding, more facilities. They're going to be the most competitive for faculty. So as a faculty member, I wanted to make sure that I only went to an R1 university because I knew that they would have the research facilities to support my research. So keep that in mind, though I do want to say there's a lot of R2, sort of the second tier of research universities, that are also very good. So they might specialize in one particular area. But, looking at that research classification, R1 or R2, is very important in this process. And it really tells you what is the center of gravity of that university, what is the focus. So the University of Alabama is a relatively large university. We've got about 43,000 students. Of those 43,000 students, 6,279 are master's or doctoral students. So probably about a third of those are doctoral students. We offer more than 160 different master's and doctoral programs. And especially if you're an international student, but hopefully all students will be interested in this. We do have international students from over 80 countries. So almost certainly the country you're from, if you're not from the US, is represented at the University of Alabama. We also have a very big, beautiful campus. So this is one of the big selling points for us. As well as having excellent programs, our campus is absolutely gorgeous. It's set in just perfectly manicured parkland. It's a beautiful place, and it's an honor to work here every day. In terms of, what makes us the University of Alabama, one of the big reasons that people know us is our alumni have done great things. So these are people who are leaders in industry, technology, literature, the arts, entertainment, and sports. We've got a lot of highly ranked programs. For example, we've got business programs that are in the top 10, top 20. If you're interested in advertising and public relations, our program is the top in the country. Our law school is one of the top in the country as well. Other big areas of emphasis for us, and we do a lot of things, but the big things again we might be really well known for. We're a world leader in water research and materials science. We also have world-class athletic programs. Sitting about 100 meters from me right now is one of the 10 largest stadiums in the world. So I mentioned we've got a beautiful campus. And also I want to really talk about that Southern hospitality. I'm not originally from the US. I'm originally from England. So I came to the US as an international student. I've lived all over the US. The South is by far the most friendly part of the US. So you will be, doesn't matter where you're from, if you're from Washington State, New Jersey, or Addis Ababa, you'll be welcomed with open arms on this campus. All right, so diving in a little bit here, what I want to start out with, as you think about starting to put together applications, thinking about which university you want to apply for, do want to remind you that in the US, there's a lot of universities. There's a lot, thousands. And there's many different types. So the University of Alabama is a comprehensive research doctoral university. So that means we've got students who are doing undergraduate 4-year degrees. We've got people doing masters. We've got people who are doing professional programs. We've got people who are doing doctoral programs. We've got robust research programs. We do a lot. It's a big, comprehensive university. You're going to find a lot of universities in the US where they're just they just do bachelor's degrees, or they might do bachelor's degrees and masters, or they might do bachelor's degrees, masters, and a small number of doctoral programs, or they might only do professional doctoral programs. So when you're looking at programs, when you think about universities, think about what type you're aiming for. Again, if you're looking at a PhD, aiming for that R1, R2, doctoral universities. But masters, maybe there's a great program for you where the university only does bachelor's and master's degrees. And then also think about the setting of those universities. As I've mentioned, the University of Alabama is a very big university. It's huge. Many people who come from much smaller universities are a little bit overwhelmed at the start. But for grad students, mostly you hang out in your own department, so it's not quite so overwhelming. Also think about, do you want to be in a city? Do you want to be in a smaller town setting? The University of Alabama is not in a big city. So if you're looking for that big city life, we're not the place for you, but we are the place for that classic university experience, the sort of university experience you see on the movies, that sort of thing. Again, big, beautiful buildings like the one sitting in this image here, park-like setting. That is very much the University of Alabama. And so when people think about a big US university, we are that. And, the one you may have seen in the movies might have actually been the University of Alabama. It's not uncommon that people film on our campus just because of the beautiful setting. All right, let's dive more directly into the application part. And this is where I want you to enter an answer into the webinar chat, not the Q&A, but there's a webinar chat, so that the chat option. I want you to think about what are some of the most important things that we're looking for in an application. So when you apply, what are we looking for in the perfect student? So put your answers into the webinar chat. There's no wrong answer to this. But, tell me the sort of thing that you think we're looking for, and we'll then discuss those. And And these can be one-word answers, don't have to write a sentence. Oh, it looks like chat is disabled. You might have to use the Q&A option. I apologize for that. So put your question into the Q&A session instead. So at the bottom of your screen, you have an option for Q&A. All right, excellent. Okay, so I see a couple of answers there. So one is transcript, resilience. I like that one. There's someone who says they see a screen in front of the presentation screen and can't see it properly. Uh, let's see what's going on there. Let me unshare for a moment and then reshare. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so hopefully that is working better now. Okay, let's go back to your answers. Uh, so we've got transcripts. Of course, transcripts are important. The grades are important. Resilience. I like that one. Uh, doing a graduate degree is hard. It's a lot of work, so it really does take a lot of resilience and persistence. So that's actually something we do look for as well. Uh, Statement of purpose. So someone says statement of purpose. Absolutely. We get a lot of information from that statement of purpose. So recommendation letters. So yes, absolutely. That tells us something about students' areas of strength. Good GPA, recommendations, and a clear statement of purpose, showing prospects, so showing potential. Uh, area of specialization, how clear the applicant communicates their interest in the program and the school. That's a really important one because I'm going to focus on something, and that's related to this, and then research experience. So yeah, all of these things are important. Uh, but there's one thing that really sort of encapsulates all these, and all of these items that you've all talked about. Uh, we can actually capture information on this. So this is critical thinking skills. So all of these items you've talked about, so letters of recommendation, statement of purpose, that sort of thing, they all tell us something about how you think and how you deal with problems. So this is probably a higher level than most of the answers that you gave. So we're looking for how do you think? How do you think through a problem? And so typically when a letter of recommendation is being written, this is one of the main things that we'll focus on. So I focus on this when I'm writing, and I know a lot of professors focus on this. Uh, when we're looking at your statement of purpose, we're looking at how well you are thinking through things. You know, how well do you sell yourself in that statement of purpose? So at the end of the day, this is really one of the most important things that we're evaluating in your application. And we're using all of that information that you mentioned to get to this piece of information. Now, let's talk for a moment about what these application materials are. So pretty much any place you apply to, you're going to have to fill in an application form. So that's going to have some information about, your name, your address, where you're from, your academic history, what program you're interested in, all that sort of thing. So that's sort of the most basic part of the application. You're going to submit some transcripts. Uh, you're going to have some letters of recommendation be submitted. You're going to have a statement of purpose. You're going to send us a CV or a resume. If you're from a country where English is not the official language, we're going to ask for a English language score. And then some programs, again, we've got 160 programs on campus. Some programs are going to ask for additional information. So that might be a writing sample. This can take a lot of different forms. So it could be they ask for a paper that you wrote for class. It could be if you've got a master's degree, you send your master's thesis, or if you did an honors thesis in your undergraduate, you send that. Some PhD programs might require a research proposal. That tends to be less common in the US than in, say, Europe. And then some programs might also require an admission test score, so something like a GRE or a GMAT. That's also becoming less common as well. We've only got probably 10 programs out of our 160 that require a GRE. So this is sort of the basic components of an application. And one of the things we do when we've got all that information, and I'm going to talk about a lot of this stuff in more detail in a moment, is that we look at this holistically. Now, you've probably heard this term before. We look at your application materials holistically. What does this actually mean, though? So throw some answers into the Q&A, and we'll see if how close you get to this. So again, don't hesitate. There's not a wrong answer here or anything like that. Let's see, it's popped up blocking the screen again. Just one second. Oops. Hold on one second. Just open that again. Apologies for that. We're having some issues with the sharing here. All right, back up. So let's look at what answers you put in there. So looking something as a whole, not breaking it into its individual parts. Looking at the entire application set of documents to see how it is related or connected. We're looking at all the areas of the candidate from academic competence to social impact. And then also, just basically looking at that whole application. So this is really, oh, sorry, that's the wrong presentation. I apologize for that. Hold on. All right. I have never had this problem before. Okay, so when we're looking at something holistically, that means we're looking at all that information. So very often people will ask me, okay, I've got this GPA or this CGPA or these grades, can I get in? Any really good grad school is not going to be able to answer that question because we're not going to admit just based on GPA. So we're going to look at all of your application materials. Uh, your GPA is, of course, part of that. But maybe you've got something else that's really strong. Maybe you have a statement of purpose that's really strong. Maybe you've got some really good work experience. That, in many cases, can overcome a poor GPA. So always think holistically with this. We're never just looking at the transcripts, especially with doctoral programs. Now, what overall is the goal of a graduate program application? Yes, we're looking at things like can you think critically? But ultimately, we're looking at do you have the potential for success? And each part of this application is going to measure this in some way. As examples, letters of recommendation might look at your work ethic. So your professor or an old supervisor may comment on how you work, how you will work within a team. They may comment on your skill sets. They may comment on areas that need development. They may comment on areas which are really fantastic. So that's the sort of information we get from an ideal letter of recommendation. Transcripts, we're looking at your academic performance. What grades are you getting? Uh, and we very much do understand that different countries, even different universities in the US have different gradings, different grading types. Now, a big university like us, chances are we've had students from your university before. Chances are we've at least had applicants from your university before. So we're mostly familiar with the different grading systems. We've dealt with them before. Writing samples, and this includes the statement of purpose. We're looking at how well you formulate ideas and solutions, as well as the general comment of, say, a statement, general content of the statement of purpose. How well do you write? And be careful here when you're using AI as well. If you're using artificial intelligence, we want this to come from the heart. We want this to be you speaking. And then your CV tells us about your past experience. So that might tell us a lot about, work experience you've got, research experiences, that sort of thing. I want to spend a little bit of time on that statement of purpose because for me and for many of the program directors that I talk to, this is probably the most important part. And it's also the part that the most people do poorly. So it's been very much my mission for at least the last 10 years to try and make people write better statements of purpose that really represent their skill set. Now, in general, a statement of purpose has three parts. Now, do keep in mind that some programs may have some very specific requirements. So always, always, always look at the program webpage to make sure that there are not specific requirements that you're missing. The statement of purpose, though, if you consider sort of the three basic parts, first part is what have you done in the past that has prepared you for the program? What is your academic foundation? What do we have? How have you prepared yourself and how can we help build on that? So that's going to be about a third of your statement of purpose. Then we want to know why the University of Alabama and why that program. And then we want to know what your goals are after you finish that program. Now, if I were to pick on one part of the statement of purpose that is done poorly, it is why that particular university or why that program. Often what we see is we see a lot of students making a very basic mistake. They write one statement of purpose and then they send it to different universities and they just change the university name. That is a really sure way of not getting admitted to a program. You need to customize your statement of purpose for each university, especially with regard to that second point in the slide. It's also very important that we know your goals after you finish the program because you may be a fantastic student. You may have a perfect GPA, you may have glowing letters of recommendation. But if your goals don't match where we can get you, we won't admit you because we want to make sure also that we can help you achieve your career goals. If we can't, you should probably be going to a different university. So basically, we need to know three things. Why should we consider your application? Have you seriously considered us? And are your future goals a fit? So statement of purpose is really important. All right. So a question. Again, put the answers in the Q&A. If your grades are okay, which is more important, your statement of purpose or your grades? So your grades are good. Statement of purpose or your grades okay, more important. So put your answers into the Q&A. Excellent. All right. So I can tell you guys are listening to me. So very much the statement of purpose is probably more important than your grades. Now, this may differ by program, but I've had a number of program directors tell me that if a student has a great GPA, but their statement of purpose is not good, they're not going to admit them. They're not going to consider them for admission. If their grades are okay, but they have a really good statement of purpose, they're going to consider them for admission. So don't underestimate the importance of that statement of purpose and spend some serious time writing it. All right, other writing samples. As I mentioned earlier, there are some programs which may require a more detailed writing sample. As an example, our creative writing program, I think, requires a 20-page paper. So, that is, given that the focus there is writing, actually, focus of any graduate program is writing, that seems reasonable. So these could be paper from a class, it could be you've published a paper. That's fantastic if you've published a paper in a peer-reviewed high impact factor journal. I do want to specify that. Just publishing a paper in anything, that's not so good. If you're publishing, it needs to be in somewhere high profile. So, but typically if you've got a good published paper though, probably you'll almost certainly be admitted if you're a good fit. A research proposal, one of the programs I manage, our interdisciplinary studies PhD, we require a research proposal. So 2-page proposal. It's not huge, but we want to see that you know what you're going to be doing. So this is probably, I'd say probably 1 in 10 of our programs requires a writing sample other than the statement of purpose. Now, with the statement of purpose or a writing sample, we're going to look closely at your writing. So we're going to look for, can you formulate an idea, argue for that idea, and come to a well thought out conclusion? So even a statement of purpose, the idea that you're arguing for is that you should be considered for the University of Alabama admission with us. And we also want to see that you can organize your thoughts clearly, coherently, and importantly, concisely. So don't underestimate the power of good, clear writing. And again, minimize your use of AI. It's good to sort of use AI to clean up grammar, that sort of thing, but do not write this with AI. There are ways that we can detect some of this. And if we detect heavy usage of AI, that is not a positive for your application. Uh, Less important, but still important. Do you use grammar correctly? Especially in the STEM fields, we'll see you can formulate an idea. We understand that, especially if a student is not from a country where their first language is English, they may have issues with that. It's one of our jobs is to try and help with that when you get here. Are there issues with spelling? Again, try to make sure that all your spelling is correct. But we're fairly sympathetic, especially for if we're working with a non-English speaker. All right, quick word about your CV. Again, spend some time putting together a CV. This is where we want to see evidence of your past success. So you might have wonderful prior research experience, you might have presentations at conferences, you might have peer-reviewed publications, you might have admission. You might have internships. Sorry, I was reading a chat thing there. So this is where you want to emphasize your past successes. Test scores. You may have to do a GRE or a GMAT. For us, if you're going to a business program, you're probably going to have to do a GRE or a GMAT. The most important thing with these tests is to practice, practice, and practice again. You need to know what the minimum score is. So graduate school doesn't require a test score. So the programs set the minimum score. So you'll need to look on the individual program web pages to see what the minimum score is. And my other big piece of advice is take that test well ahead of the deadline. So if you're applying to a PhD program for next fall 27, you probably want to be putting your application in October or November at the latest. That means you need to be taking your GRE, GMAT. Well, you need to be planning that now. You need to be taking it over the summer. It might be you don't get the score you want. Then you've got a chance to retake it. Never leave that till the last moment. If you're from a country where English is not the first language of business, you may have to take a English language proficiency test again. Take those early, practice, practice, and practice again, and make sure you know what the minimum score is that is needed. All right, deadlines in general. And this is really, 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 everything I'm talking about is important, but this one's really important. Apply well in advance of any deadline. So, as an example, our biology program, I believe for fall 27, the deadline is December 1. That doesn't mean apply on November 30th. What that means is you need to be getting your application in by probably mid-October. You want to get your application in well ahead of that deadline. Now, this is for two reasons. One, if there's any issues with the application, there's any issues with documentation, if you apply very close to that deadline, you have a chance of missing that deadline. So it allows you some leeway to, find other documents, fix things, etc. Also, many programs, they're admitting before that deadline. So if they get a really good person before that deadline, most likely they are going to be offering admission. And so by the time you get to that deadline, some of that funding may have actually been used up. And so applying early also gives you the best chance of getting funded. And I'm sure that's important to most of you on this call. So the best applicants for full admission are applying in October or November of the previous year. Let's see, I've got a screen popped up again. Hold on, I'm just going to unshare. Don't know why this keeps happening. Hold on. Stop that 1 second. Thank you for your patience with this. All right. So, another very important thing. Yeah, I keep saying that things are very important. Everything here I talk about is important. I wouldn't talk about it if it wasn't important. One common frustration when you're applying to a program is you send an email to a professor and they never respond. I understand. Uh, it's a common problem. And as speaking as a professor, we get a lot of emails from prospective students. And so what I want you to do is to make sure that that email that you're sending is really well written. So use complete sentences, check your spelling and your grammar, focus on your research interests and how those fit with the professor. So that is the focus of this email. Do not discuss funding in initial emails. Very often, I would probably say 80% of the time, the first few sentences are about the importance of funding. We understand that funding is very, very important, but you needing funding is not going to get you admitted. What you need to focus on is the things that will get you admitted. Again, that fit between you and the professor and or department and or program. So if there's a good fit and you have a good rapport with the professor, the conversation will very often naturally move towards funding, but don't start that email with funding. The message that sends to the professor is funding is the most important thing, not the degree. So almost certainly, if you start out an email with a request for funding, that professor will not respond. The other thing is keep your email short, a paragraph or two, because then it's something that they can open, they can read quickly, they can give an answer to. If I get a 3-page email and I get probably 50 of those a day about funding, I don't always have time to read 3 pages. So I'm probably going to save that for later. And it's probably going to be, it could be a week or more before I get back. So having a shorter, well-written email is going to ensure that you have, or make it more likely that you have a quick response. So again, writing, how you write that is very important. I do also want to say, there are a lot of resources to make sure that all of these things are well written. So it could be a statement of purpose, could be that email to a professor. Of course, you're going to proofread and then proofread those again. And that goes for that email as well. That's just as important that email is well written as that it is the statement of purpose. And treat it the same. Whether it be a writing sample or whether it be a statement of purpose or an email, if you have a writing center or a career center at your university, use them. So make sure that you have them proofread stuff. Also, one thing you've almost certainly got is you have current professors, and those current professors are very invested in you being successful. So I want you to find a current professor to check the content. Does your writing show excellent critical thinking skills? Is that the sort of thing that they would hope to receive from a student? So remember, all your professors have been through this process. So they all know what it's like, and they all are working to make sure that you are successful. That's the most important thing we do in our jobs. So for me, one of the most important things is making sure that my students are successful and they move on to achieve their goals. That is of absolute vital importance. All right, the next thing, and we are just going to ignore that screen that's popped up uh, because the last slide, I really want to talk about a very important resource, and that is Graduate Program Director. Every program at a US university has a Graduate Program Director. If you have questions about admissions expectations, what is expected in a statement of purpose, what's expected in letter of recommendation, what students do when they graduate, or you just want to actually communicate with some students in that program, the graduate program director is the person to help you with this. They are charged with administering the application process for that particular application. So when you have questions, look on their webpage, find out who the graduate program director is, and make sure that you speak to that particular person about any questions you may have. And they're also the best person to talk to about funding as well. So, yeah, grad program director is a very, very important person. All right, I'm going to actually stop this, give some time for questions. I see that there's a lot of questions come in the Q&A. I can tell you I'm not going to have a chance to answer all of them, but I'm going to have a moment to look, I'll take a moment to look through them. Let's see, I'm actually going to stop sharing here so you can actually see me. And let me just close out my PowerPoint. Okay, let's take a look at some of these questions, because I'm sure a lot of you have the same questions. So one of the questions here, what if my undergrad was purely taught in English? So I'm assuming that this corresponds to the English language requirement. So for us, the English language requirement is based on the official language of the country. So if the official language is English, then we waive the English language proficiency requirement. So as an example, Nigeria, the official business language is English. So we don't actually require a English proficiency score. Cameroon, another country in West Africa, their official language is not English. So we do require an English language score. So one of the questions, please, is it professional for your professor to look at your statement of purpose, and how do you ask the professor? So I'm assuming that you're actually referring to a professor at your current university. So that's the assumption I'm making here. In that case, just go and ask your professor this question. Will you look at my graduate school application materials and help me? And 99% of professors are going to be very, very happy to help you with that. I routinely help my own students with this. It's part of my job, because my job is to guarantee the success of my students. So really just go and ask them. There was a question here about, is the GRE or GMAT mandatory? Now that is determined on a program by program basis. So at the University of Alabama, for most of our business programs, it's mandatory. For pretty much all of our other programs, it's not required at all. There's a question here, how likely is admission with a 2.6 GPA? I'm not quite sure what scale that's on. I'm going to assume for this purpose it's on a US 4 scale with 12 years of experience in the field of study. So that one, we would look at that. If you've got very strong work experience and we can see in your resume that you've been continuously successful through those 12 years, yeah, absolutely. We would certainly consider you. Another person, this is a good question. Do you recommend contacting supervisors before applying? So if you are applying and you want someone to serve as a recommender, I would always advise going and speaking with them beforehand. Uh, then, because then they're going to have advice for you as well. And so most of them will be very honored that they want you they want you to consider them as a recommender. But yeah, always talk to them beforehand. And then there's a question, how much weight is given to tests like IELTS, TOEFL, or Duolingo? Um, In terms of the admissions process, for each of those tests, if you take one of those tests, all we're looking for you to do is to get the minimum score. There's really no advantage to getting a higher score than the minimum. We want to make sure that your English language skills meet a certain standard, and we've determined that minimum score that determines that standard. So you'll never get bonus points for having a higher score. But in terms of which score we prefer, that might be what that question was referring to. We don't have a preference. If we've determined that we will accept a score, that means we will accept that score. There's honestly no preference between scores. Uh, let's see. Just scrolling up. There's a question here, a very common one, saying the application fee is too high. Uh, we understand that application fees are expensive. Now, we only have very limited ways in which we can waive the application fee. And this is true for there's many universities that can't waive the application fee. We can, but only in very specific circumstances. And one of the big circumstances there is each October, we have a free application week. Now, because you're in our system, you will get an email about our free application week. So basically, we remove the application fee typically, mid-October for about a week. And so keep an eye out for that. And we do it at that time because it's early enough that uh, it sets you up well to apply for full admission for any of our programs. So please do, aim for our free application week. I'm just scrolling up here. See if any more have come in. So there's a person here saying there's no correlation between IELTS results and statement of purpose. How do you compensate for that difference? I guess I don't see why there should be a correlation between the IELTS and the statement of purpose. So I might need some clarification on that. So I just see that Cephas, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, asked, the Department of Mechanical Engineering did specify that you should get a faculty member to agree to supervise you before you apply for research-based studies. So for this is actually very common. So there's a number of our programs. If you do not have a faculty member identified when you apply, you will be rejected. So mechanical engineering's one, my own department, geological sciences is another, biological sciences is another. And this is where it may be particularly frustrating if you are not getting responses to emails. And so really what I want to emphasize there is that is where it's very important that you put a lot of effort into writing that email. I would probably say that 80% of those emails that we get are poorly written. So You spend a lot of time writing your statement of purpose. I want you to treat your email to faculty members in the same way. Make it clear, make it concise. Again, that first email, long paragraph, maybe two paragraphs, not multiple pages. So you need to focus on, why are you a good fit for that professor? What can you contribute to that research laboratory? What is the skill set that you bring? Why should they consider you? Because again, mechanical engineering, they get thousands of applications for each admission cycle. And so those professors, I don't know, they're probably getting 50, 60 emails a week, probably more than that. And so you need to make sure that yours stands out. Uh, and make sure that that person is a good fit for you, truly is a good fit. In my own academic department, we will get students who send emails around, and there's very different specializations. And you see that the student is sending the same email around, they're just changing the specialization. Remember, faculty members talk to each other, so we know if people are doing that. So really be very honest that this is what you want to do. This is your passion, and don't be emailing professors outside of that area. There was a question here about identifying a faculty member if you're interested in a course-based master's in mechanical engineering or any other program. That's usually not important. If you want to just do a course-based master's, you don't need to identify a faculty member to work with. So that's not important. It's only important if you're doing a research-based master's or a PhD. Let's see what else here. How do you navigate a scenario where your line of interest does not match with your background study? For example, if you're interested in earthquake engineering and you're from Ghana and have not experienced earthquake engineering, this is where you need to show that you have the skills to contribute to that field. So if you're interested in earthquake engineering, for example, we do earthquake engineering. A lot of our earthquake engineers come in from very strong structural engineering backgrounds. They understand how buildings work. Now, it might be you come in from my own field, from geophysics, where you've worked with earthquakes and you know about how earthquakes work, but you don't know how structures work. What is the expertise that you can contribute? How does your skill set tie to that field? We don't necessarily expect you to have direct experience in earthquake engineering, but you have something that can contribute to that. So that's the key thing. How can your experience contribute to that? I'll give a specific example for earthquake engineering. We've had people from space science come into earthquake engineering. And that's because when you're launching a rocket, you deal with a lot of vibration and you need to minimize that vibration so it doesn't destroy the rocket. That's the same math, the same sort of problem as you're dealing with as an earthquake engineer. And so that's an example of how that skill set is transferable. Question here, do you recommend calling a professor if emails are not responded to over time? I want to, if a faculty member is not responding to an email, there's most likely a reason. Number one, the email is probably not written that well and focuses on funding, or it's too long. So if you're not getting a response, my first instinct would be to look at that email and look at how that email could be improved. Now, in terms of calling, I don't necessarily recommend that. In the US, to be perfectly honest, it's not a normal way of communicating with a professor. Many professors don't even have a phone in their office, to be perfectly honest. Email is the best way of contacting a professor. Uh, so calling would be a last resort after you have looked at rewriting your email. You've probably had other people review your email. Again, I want to emphasize, never send something in unless another human has looked at that email or that statement of purpose. Always have other people review your documents. We do the same professionally as professors. If we've got important documents going in, we always have other people review them. Uh, let's see, there was a revisit from question about IELTS. So, and I guess the question about uh, the correlation between IELTS and the statement of purpose. No, there's no correlation between those. We're looking at two very different things. With the IELTS, we're looking at things like your speaking skills, your listening skills, your writing skills. The statement of purpose, that's focused on your writing skills. It's focused on one part of the IELTS. And we're not using the statement of purpose to determine, how good your English is. We're using the statement of purpose to determine why you want to do a degree at the University of Alabama and what you want to do next. So they're looking at very, very different things. Uh, another very good question here. Uh, Seen on the university website that 3-year qualifications are accepted for admission? Yes, absolutely. So we consider anyone with a bachelor's degree. Many of you may have 4-year degrees, some of you may have 3-year degrees. I have a 3-year bachelor's degree. Question is, in practice, how are applications with these qualifications evaluated compared to those with a full bachelor's degree? So number one, I wouldn't refer to a 4-year as a full bachelor's degree. A 3-year or a 4-year, they're both full bachelor's degrees. What we're looking at, we're not looking at the length of the degree. We're looking at, does the student have the qualifications necessary for success? How long that degree was is not relevant to that. Have they got the necessary academic background? Do they have the necessary grades to suggest success? Are they a good fit with us? So don't focus on whether it's a 3 or 4-year degree. Focus on whether you're qualified to do that master's or PhD. Another person asked, what are the qualifications? What's the timeline for admission decisions after applying? That's going to vary dramatically by program. And this is really where you need to talk to the graduate program director. Some, it might be a week. With PhD programs, it could be 3-4 months. And so I would always suggest contacting the graduate program director for advice on that. We are about at the hour, so I do want to just finish up with a couple of questions here. There was someone here that says, please, what makes a statement of purpose stand out? So it needs to be well written, needs to say, what is your educational foundation? Why you want to come to the University of Alabama, and what do you want to do next? If you can do that concisely in a page or maybe a page and a half, that's great. That's fantastic. But we're looking for very clear, concise. We're looking for it to be tailored to the University of Alabama. Let's see. Question at the bottom. I will answer it live. The question was, can I get your email address? So I'm actually going to, let's see, and type the answer. Here we go. My email address is amg@ua.edu. So please do feel free to send me an email. I do warn you, the next couple of days I've got a very, very hectic schedule, so I probably would not get back with you for at least 2 days. But if you've got follow-on questions, do send me an email. Again, the purpose of this webinar was really to make sure that you can submit a fantastic application. Would love it to be the University of Alabama, but I really want you to be successful whatever university you go to. So, uh, so good luck, and wish you luck in the application process, and you'll do great. And you should have my email address now in the chat, amg@ua.edu. Again, amg@ua.edu. All right, good luck, everyone. It's great sharing an hour with you, and have a great day. Bye bye.